Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, and it's time to do another book review. Apologize for the lateness of the review, to why it took so long from the last one to this one. But as you can see behind me, there's been some moving. I also apologize for the mess behind me. I do not have a space set up yet. Then again, I didn't have a space set up in Florida. We may do. Okay, so here we are. We are now just finished. We are on Dark Tower, number 4, Wizard and Glass. So remember, we left Roland and his quartet on Blaine the Mono, heading towards Topeka, end of the line in the riddling contest, okay? So here we are. I almost made you wait as long between videos as it actually took between the Wastelands and this one. I could have waited like 4 years and then done this video, and you'd have been like, wow, it's like it was in the real world. So, up to this point, this is the longest so far of the Dark Tower novels. This book clocks in at, the soft cover here, clocks in at 668 pages. And just like the Wastelands, this edition has illustrations. I don't care for the illustrations in this one as much as I do in the Wastelands. The Wastelands, I know they're a little more cartoony in the Wastelands. I don't really like this art style. It's weird to me. I never liked it a whole lot. But anyway, this book is long. And the majority of it takes place in Roland's youth, when Roland is 14 years old. And I was going to criticize the book as far as the length, and I felt that maybe all this stuff was starting to drag, until I realized that up until now, this is the first time you get to see Roland's past. Roland in Gilead, Roland after he wins his guns, Roland at 14 in his youth. So this is the first time you actually get to see Roland and Cuthbert and Alan and all those guys and what they were like as kids. And so I was going to complain about the length, but then I realized that I think it might have been necessary because his world back then, when he was a kid, was a bit fascinating. And I understand why King took so much time to do it. And at its heart, this is a love story. So, of course, in King's world, love story means there's a lot of 14-year-olds having sex. That's a love story. It really is a love story, though. Okay. So, I'm going to try to do this without the Wikipedia page, and hopefully I won't ramble too long. But the story, the gist of it is pretty simple. So it starts out where the last book picked up. They're on Blaine the Mono, barreling to Topeka, and they're having a riddling contest. And they're riddling, okay? And they've decided they're all going to take turns. Roland and Eddie and Jake and Susanna. They're all going to take turns, and they're going to try to stump Blaine. So they riddle after riddle after riddle, and this goes on for a while. All the route from Ludd to Topeka, it takes the whole route. And Blaine is winning, and Blaine is winning, and Blaine is winning. And they've riddled thousands of riddles. They've riddled all the riddles they could find, and they can't figure out how to stump Blaine until Eddie says, you know what, I figured it out. I'm going to stump Blaine. And he basically stumps Blaine with jokes. And he tells Blaine a joke, and Blaine can't figure it out. And it taxes his computer system to the point where it basically overloads him. And then finally Eddie says, hey, Blaine, why did the dead baby cross the road? Because it was stapled to the chicken. And Blaine couldn't figure it out, and it overloaded his circuits, and he crashes into Topeka. And they survive. Blaine is dead. They start walking, and they crash into Kansas, but it's not Midworld they're in anymore. They crashed into Kansas from the Stand. And this is the first time that Stephen King starts to break the barriers between worlds. See, up until this point, everything has been Midworld. except when he went to go to New York to get Eddie and Susanna and Jake. Now, you've been hearing the worlds are getting thin. The tower is breaking down. The barriers between worlds are breaking down. You've been hearing that. Now you're seeing that because they leave, they get off at Topeka and they leave Midworld and they wind up in the Stand, basically. They wind up in Kansas and they start reading these things about the plague and the walking dude and Mother Abigail. And, of course, Eddie, and they don't know anything about a killer plague because it's not really Eddie's world, but it's another world. So the barriers are breaking. So they get off in Topeka and they start walking. And they come across a thinny, which is sort of like a spot between worlds that has been rubbed so thin. And the way they describe the thinny in here is gross. It's like it warbles and it makes these weird noises. And it's like a silvery liquid puddle. It always kind of made me think of the T-1000, when the liquid metal. And it drives you crazy. And it can kill you. So they're walking down I-70 through Kansas, right through this thinny. They decide to take a stop. And take a stop like right around the thinny. And Roland decides to tell them a story of his past, of when he first encountered the thinny. So we go back. So now that's the majority of the book now goes back to when Roland was 14 years old. Just won his guns from court. The very next day, if you remember the gunslinger, he wins his guns. He goes down to like the Lowtown. He finds a hooker. The story picks up from there. His father comes and drags him out of a hooker's bed. Tells him that he's sending him and Cuthbert and Alon to Magus to get them out of the way of John Farson's army. And he says, while you're there, they go in disguise as ambassadors of the affiliation to count cattle and to count resources, basically. And he says, while you're there, look around, report back. Oh, and by the way, if you happen to find one of the wizard's rainbows, bring that back too. So they go to Magus, the three of them. When they get there, Roland meets Susan Delgado. He sees her out the window. That's why he always refers to her as the girl, the lovely girl out the window, because the first time he sees her, she's there. Well, actually, the first time he sees her, she's walking back from the witch's hut, but he always remembers her as the girl's window. So he finds Susan Delgado, and he falls instantly in love with her. And Susan Delgado is like a 14-year-old girl, and she's a ghillie. And basically, she's not a whore, a concubine, I guess. She is the mayor's ghillie. See, the mayor's old, the mayor's wife is old, and so it's her job in exchange for money, land, and stuff like that, to sleep with the mayor and give him a child. So, what was that, a concubine, I guess? She's a ghillie. So, he meets her, and he falls in love, and the story of them in Magus takes place over a year. And over the year, they start looking into the town. They realize that the town is, everybody's saying, yeah, we're for the good guys, but there's something amiss in there. And Roland looks around, he sees there's a lot of horses, there's a lot of land. And way out in the back of, like, Magus, there's an oil patch. And they call it Citgo. And they don't know why it's Citgo, because it's this machinery with these weird words like Citgo and Sunoco on it. But it's an oil patch with oil derricks. And right next to that, there's a box canyon called Eyebolt Canyon. And in that canyon, there's a thinny. It's the first time Roland sees a thinny. So he's wondering, people are saying, yeah, we're for the affiliation, we're for the good guys, but something's amiss here. And they start digging, they start counting, they start asking questions. Roland and Susan, they start falling in love, and there's this relationship building, and then she says, no, eventually they have sex. Let's cut to the chase. Eventually they have sex. She breaks her promise to be a ghillie, and they have sex. They have a lot of sex in the book. A lot of 14-year-old sex in the book. All over the place. Barns, hay fields, abandoned huts, anywhere. having sex. 14-year-olds sowing their oats. Yeah, that's what they're doing. And then he starts asking her about stuff. So the gist of it is the mayor and the mayor's right-hand man. Mayor's name is Thorin. Mayor Thorin. And Kimber Reimer, he's the mayor's advocate. And then there's 3 guys in town called the Big Coffin Hunters. Jonas Eldred, Clay Reynolds, and Roy DePape. And they're the bad guys. They're the muscle of the group. They're like Magus' version of the mafia. It turns out that the mayor and Kimber and all that, they're in league with John Farson, the bad man. And what John Farson wants is he wants to come into Magus. He wants to take all of the oil. And he's going to use the oil to power his machineries, his ancient weapons from the old people. And he's going to use that to attack Gilead and all of Inworld and try to conquer it. And Roland discovers this, that basically the mayor and everybody in charge of this town has handed it over to the bad guys. And the Big Coffin Hunters are there to make sure that that happens. They're the muscle. So he eventually comes up with a plan. It's a good plan to stop this. But he didn't expect to fall in love with Susan. So it turns out towards the end, I mean, because there's a lot that goes on in the book, but a lot of it is character building. And you talk about the Big Coffin Hunters and whatnot. And a lot of it is the investigating. And a lot of it is you get to see Roland with his old boys, with his quartet. So, eventually, Roland and Susan are discovered. They're discovered that they're sleeping together. So the Big Coffin Hunters come up with a plan. And they kill the mayor. And they kill Kimber Reimer. And they frame Roland and Cuthbert and Elan. They frame them for the murders of the mayor and the advocate. And they tell the people in town that they're part of they're Farson spies, which they really aren't. And they throw them in jail. And then Susan breaks them out. And they say, well, we're going to go stop it. So what? We're going to go stop it. You stay here, wait for us. We're going to go stop this. And they go and they get a bunch of firecrackers. And they get a bunch of things. And they set fire to the oil field. They just torch it. And Roland doesn't quite know how oil works. So he figures he's got to blow up all the derricks one at a time. Well, they light up one derrick. And of course, the pipe, there's piping underneath all this stuff. So he blows up one derrick, and then the whole oil field goes up in flames. Explodes all the derricks. And then they realize that this thing that Roland's father was looking for, they call it Merlin's Rainbow, the pink grapefruit, it's in Magus. So they decide that if they can get it, they can bring it back to Roland's father. It's a looking glass. It's basically like it can see the future, but it's evil. It really it kills. It kills the people that are using it. So they blow up the oil field. They go and they steal back the wizard's glass. They kill Roy DePape, and Roland winds up killing Jonas Eldred. Just shoots him right in the face and winds up killing him. And then they go after Farson's men with the tankers. And they blow up the tankers. And they get Farson's men to chase them. And they lead them into Eyebolt Canyon where the Thinny is. It's a box canyon. So they lead them in. All the while they're chasing them. And then they abandon their horses. And once all of Farson's men are in, they set fire to the brush behind them. And they climb out. So now they're in a box canyon with a huge brush fire on one side. And the Thinny on the other. And eventually everybody winds up going in the Thinny. And they all die. So literally these 3 boys, one of which is armed with a slingshot. See, Roland's the only one with guns. Cuthbert has a slingshot. So these 3 boys not only kill 2/3 of the Big Coffin Hunters, but most of Farson's men. There are dozens of them. And they kill them. But all the while Roland thinks Susan is safe. Well, she's not really safe. The Witch of Magus winds up going and taking her, capturing her, and she gets the town to incite a riot. And they basically take Susan, who is pregnant with Roland's child, after all these summer of lovemaking. And they kill her. They burn her at the stake. They literally burn her at the stake. They put her on a bonfire with all the scarecrows that they call stuffy guys. They put her on the bonfire, and they torture. They set her on fire. They kill her, and they kill his unborn child. It sends Roland into a tizzy. And he sees all of that in the wizard's glass. And he kind of goes crazy. And Cuthbert and Elaine have to basically take him and throw him on a horse and bring him back to Gilead. Like that. And that's how his 14th year goes. So he finishes telling the tale. And they're all sitting there. And they continue walking down Route I-70. And they come upon the Emerald Palace. Literally, the Emerald Palace. The Wizard of Oz Emerald Palace. And they get into the palace. And they get to the chamber. And they get to the throne room. And they play out the whole Wizard of Oz thing at the end of the book. And they meet the TikTok man from Lud. Remember? Flag pulled the TikTok man out of Lud. They meet the TikTok man from Lud, who's playing the wizard. And he tries to kill Roland, but they just gun him down. And then they meet Flag. And Flag tells them, you need to cry off. Cry off the tower. Don't go any further. Cry off, people are going to die. You can turn back now, Gunslinger. And Roland tries to shoot him. And I guess I had forgotten this part, but Roland's guns, they don't work on Flag. They only misfire against Flag. His guns are enchanted, so his guns, his big sandalwood guns, they can't kill Flag. So he tries to kill Flag with Jake's Ruger, the one he got from Jake's father back in New York. And he almost kills him. He almost gets him, but Flag gets away. And Flag leaves behind the Merlin's Rainbow, the wizard's, the pink grapefruit. And the pink grapefruit has one thing left to show him. And so they go into the pink grapefruit with Roland, and they watch the day that after Roland comes back from Gilead, he goes to talk to his mother. And the pink grapefruit makes him believe that Roland's mother is the witch from Magus, Rhea, here to kill him. It tricks him into thinking that she's Rhea. And he turns around and he guns her down, and you find out that Roland killed his mother. Roland commits matricide. And the point of Flag showing him all of this is that he wants to tell Eddie and Susanna and Jake, listen, Roland is bad news. All of his friends died. He killed his mother. Susan got killed because of him. Cuthbert, Alan, Jamie DeCurry, all these people died. Jake died once because of him, because of the tower, because he's obsessed. Turn back. And that's what they tried to get him to do, was get him to turn back. And they don't turn back. They say, no, we're going to go. So at the end of the book, after the wizard's glass has shown everything, and Roland has basically bared all of his dirty secrets. Yes, I fell in love. The woman I fell in love with was murdered because of me. I murdered my own mother. Whether or not I was tricked is irrelevant. I murdered her. Yes, my friends died. All of my original quartet died. Do you still want to go with me? And they say yes. And the book ends with them walking back on the path of the beam towards Thunderclap. And so this brings a lot of things to the table. And this is where we begin to see Roland's obsession. Where we begin to see how much Roland has paid. What price Roland has paid for the tower. He probably could have saved Susan. He might have been able to save Susan. I don't know. Roland doesn't know if he could have saved Susan. It's possible that he could have taken Susan and just quit the quest and gone off and had a life for himself. But he chose to stop Farson. He chose to go on. He chose the tower. And she died. And he chose the tower, and eventually Cuthbert and Alan and all of his other buddies died. So we begin to see how much Roland has sacrificed. And we begin to see his obsession grow. And it's grown. Because it's been centuries. At the end of the book, Roland, he basically tells them he's been alive for centuries. And all the people that have died. And yes, Susan Delgado was his one true love. And she died. So we see his obsession. We see where it started. It started when he was 14 years old. And we see how he wasn't so much... He didn't make his own fate, but Ka basically made his fate for him. he's as much a minion of the Tower and a minion of Ka as Flag is, as the Crimson King is, as everybody else is. They can't stop now if they want to. And that's the thing you find out at the end of the book. Roland and Eddie and Susanna and Jake, they can't stop even if they wanted to. They have to go on now because they have all started to become as obsessed as he is. And so it starts to talk about his obsession. It starts to talk about his past. We can start to see Gilead before the world has moved on, which was really cool to see. We started to see, and then we learned about Marilyn's Rainbow. Now, two things I want to tell you before I sort of wrap this up. One thing is that, well, you know that Roland is a direct descendant of Arthur Eld, which is his version of King Arthur. Legend has it that Arthur Eld melted Excalibur and turned it into the guns that Roland now carries. So Roland's guns are basically Excalibur reforged. And the other thing it talks about the Wizard's Rainbow. And you find the pink grapefruit. Well, Arthur Eld had 13. There are 13 glass balls in the Wizard's Rainbow. The pink one is only one of them. And they're all colors. Blue, green, pink, white, red, orange, whatever. And the 13th one, black 13, it's the death one. That's the death ball. That will come into play later in the books. Not so much the pink grapefruit anymore, but black 13, the Wizard's Rainbow, we'll see that again. We'll see Flag again. But what is also really good about this book is that this is when, like I said, the worlds start to break down. They talk about the Nexus, the Tower being the Nexus of all worlds, the multiverse, all universes. And this is where you start to see it, because they leave Midworld and they go into the world of the Stand with the Walking Dude and the Plague and the Superflu and all that. And then they come out the other side. So worlds are breaking down. It's like the Tower is imploding, and the worlds, as they compress, they start blending and melting into each other. And this is the first time you see that. It's not the last time you see it. You're going to see a lot of it in the next 3 books. This is the first time you start to see the multiverse collapsing. And it starts to be really, really fascinating. I'm still going to give this a 4 out of 5 because I still think it was a little long. But still, overall, the world of Roland, it becomes more fascinating. Gilead, in-world, mid-world, end-world, all this stuff just starts to become fascinating. And you start to realize that it's all connected. And it's great. So now, the next book to read, which will be a quick read for me probably, so the review may be up soon, because it's a shorter book, is the new book, Wind Through the Keyhole. That comes after this book. The Wind Through the Keyhole takes place between Wizard and Glass and Wolves of the Kala. So I've never read it, so this is like sort of Dark Tower 4.5. So I'm going to read this book, and it's a short book, bridges the gaps between the two ends. And so since I haven't read it, it'll be a good review to see how it goes. Sorry about that. I'm going to leave that in there just because. So 4 out of 5 for Wizard's Glass. It's not my favorite, but it's not as bad as I remember it. It drags a little. If you're not, it could have been cut down. I think it could have been cut down a little bit. But man, the Big Coffin Hunters, they're some of the best villains that Stephen King has created, I think. And it's really, the feel of it is an old-timey Western book. If you like old-timey Westerns, you might like this book because it has an old-timey Western feel to it. Very Clint Eastwoodish. Very Westerny. Very spaghetti Westerny feel to it. Even though, there's the whole Wizard of Oz thing going on. So, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, pass it on. And we continue our journey. And we'll be going to the new one. The Wind Through the Keyhole. And that'll be next. So until then, keep reading.